Thanks to another $1 trillion deficit this year, right now the nation's debt is past $16 trillion.
And who has any concept of exactly how much that is? You know, what does it mean for you, the taxpayer? Well, tonight Fox 11 is on special assignment with a look at how deep the debt is for us locally and nationally.
16 followed by 12 zeros. That's how big our national debt is. $16 trillion is so big it's hard to comprehend. If you spent $1 million every day, it would take you more than 43,000 years to spend $16 trillion. If you stacked up 16 trillion $1 bills, it would reach all the way to the moon and back. Twice. How much does that mean for you? If you break it down, the national debt adds up to more than $51,000 for every man, woman, and child in the country.
There's very little question that there's a problem and that it's a big problem.
Todd Berry is with the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. He says both political parties are to blame.
Somehow they've all got to get it into their heads that they can blame each other, but in the end we're all going to go down together.
So how did we get here? Well, it didn't happen overnight. It actually started all the way back at the time of the American Revolution. Back in 1783, our nation's debt was $41 million. At one point, under President Andrew Jackson in 1835, the country was debt-free. The entire national debt was paid off. After the Civil War, it was back up to $2.2 billion. By the end of World War II, it was up to $250 billion. The debt has soared under politicians from both sides. When President Ronald Reagan took office, the debt was $914 billion. When he left 8 years later, it was $2.6 trillion. The debt climbed slightly under Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. And when George W. Bush was elected in 2000, the debt was $5.6 trillion. When he left office, the debt was $10.6 trillion. In the last 4 years under President Barack Obama, the debt has grown to $16.1 trillion. Again, that's more than $51,000 per person. But that's just the federal debt. There's also state, county, city, school district, and technical college debt. How much does that add up to? Well, it depends on where you live. If you live in Green Bay, for example, and you add up the total federal, state, and local debt, it adds up to more than $56,000. It's a little higher if you live in Appleton. One major difference between local government debt and federal debt is that local governments tend to rely on debt for major purchases, not for day-to-day operations.
We cannot borrow for operating purposes.
Jim Bloomreich is with Northeast Wisconsin Technical College.
Well, the majority of our debt right now is for replacement of the existing equipment to keep it up to date so our student has a good experience compared to what they'll see in the job market.
Debt isn't always bad.
In the city of Green Bay, the debt for local taxpayers has gone down every year for the last decade.
Debt is part of running a government in that we have to borrow money to build roads and streets and take on some debt, but it's important that we pay off more than we borrow, and we've done that successfully. And therefore have reduced our debt to where it's very manageable.
Tom Sladek is with the Brown County Taxpayers Association. He's also a Green Bay alderman. While he doesn't like debt, he's okay with some of it.
I think the debt at the local levels is probably more than it should be, more than it needs to be, but it's manageable. It's more understandable.
As for the federal debt, he's not so optimistic. Sladek is concerned we could end up like Greece, where the debt levels were so high the country couldn't repay its loans. The crisis led to massive spending cuts, protests, and unemployment soared to 25%.
And it's scary. It's gonna lead to something very severe for the country if we don't get our arms around it and get our arms around it pretty quickly.
Are you hopeful that that will happen?
I wish I could say I'm hopeful, but the march of debt at the federal level has been unimpeded for a long, long time. There obviously, are things that are systematically broke.
The national debt even has its own government agency. It's called the Bureau of Public Debt, and it's part of the Treasury Department. And the agency is actually asking for donors to help pay off the debt. You might laugh at that idea, but in the last year, the government has collected more than $7 million in gifts to help pay down the debt. At that rate, the national debt would be paid off in about 2 million years. For Fox 11 on special assignment, I'm Robert Hornacek.
Keep in mind, with the $16 trillion of debt, another $1.2 trillion was added because of the federal deficit over the most recent federal budget year. If you have an idea you'd like our special assignment team to look at, you can email them at osa@wluk.com.